And just...
No? Just that one, okay.
Just so you know, you have 5 minutes for your presentation and then we'll open up for 5 minutes of questions. But if you do go a little bit longer than your 5 allocated minutes, we're pretty relaxed about that. So
Yep.
There'll be a bell that goes off.
Good, thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm here not representing Bayview, but I'm going to speak some thoughts of Bayview residents, which of course are, your constituents. Now, Bayview, as you know, is a cute little, we really call it a small country village, because that's what it is and that's what it has been. It's not really a city residential, as you want to call it. It has few amenities, has a dairy, a couple of petrol stations, a small police presence, a couple of vineyards and some roadside stalls. It is not city residential. It has an expressway running through the middle of it. So I asked you, what is the policy problem you're trying to fix here? Because you're not making any money out of this. This is supposed to be cost neutral. Someone has said the big issue is that the same land value people are not paying the same rates. Well, how terrible is that? Should they pay the same? You're saying yes. We pay less because we get less out at Bayview, and I'll show you why that is in a moment. That, to me, is fair. So same land value should equal the same rates, you say. But that's only one dimension of economic equity. And I'm not sure who cast the policy, but it's a bad piece of policy. I have a master's degree in public policy and have some understanding of public policy. For 10 years I was a consultant to government. Before that I was policy manager, Ministry of Education. This is poor policy. I'm sorry, Council, but it's poor policy. I see no policy alternatives. I see really no policy justification, and I don't even see in there that you have the option of the status quo. Horizontal equity, yeah, you deal with the equals equally, but you must also intersect that with what we call horizontal, vertical equity, because people are different, places are different, situations and contexts are different. So you need to deal and treat unequals unequally. If we're all the same, fine, but we're not all the same. So it's the intersection of both horizontal equity and vertical equity you need to take into account. So one size fits all delivers inequity. You do not deal with all your kids the same, do you? Because they're different, they have individual differences. Now, I know, because I've been there and done that both dimensions of equity are used in these central government departments. Education, health, welfare, IRD, justice, all use differences to determine different rates of either resources supplied or of resources required. So contexts vary, individuals vary, there are individual differences and they need to be taken into account. And I would suggest to you that land value that you use for determining the greatest quantum of rates is a crude, imprecise instrument, simply because it is based on quotable value of figures which are determined by fluctuating market properties. Now, even within Napier, you have some suburbs that have gone up, some have stayed very much the same, but they are not the same, they do differ. But the critical thing is that land value, per se, bears no relationship whatsoever to the quantum of services that you supply to your constituents. And I would suggest it's better to do that. Because power, phone, TV and so on, our user pays. Then everyone is not charged the same. What you use, you pay for. That's life. Now, Bayview differs from West Shore. We're only separated by the umbilical cord of that stretch of expressway which we've just done up, and of course the cycleway. But we are vastly different, even those that have the same land value, because we have no sewerage out there. I'm talking here Ferguson Street. Ferguson Street, okay, which joins onto the cycleway. No wide streets, no cycle lanes, no road markings, no gutters, no footpaths, no berm maintenance, no council drive onto the property, no beach toilets, all those things we do not have. So how are these differences recognised? How do we recognise them? Do you recognise them? Yes, you do now, because you have differing categories. Shoving everyone in the same box does not achieve equity. Fewer rating categories, I would suggest, can only increase inequities. Water. Our water usage is metered. Why is that? Who else in Napier has that? Does City Residential have that? We pay over and above our $236 dollars per unit that we have per property. Is that fair? Is that just? But we pay that now. That's why we're not paying the same rates as City Residential. Sewerage. We pay for our own sewerage. Septic tanks are not supplied by council. We pay for those, and the minimum cost is $20,000. Check it out. And we also incur, of course, cleaning costs. City Residential does not have those. So we're suggesting that we ought not to pay for services we don't receive. That's simply fair, just and equitable. I'd also suggest this to you, but this is part of the tyranny of the majority. You've so engineered this proposed change that the bulk of people will benefit. Just a bit, but at whose expense? At our expense. That's whose expense it will be. They benefit, we lose. But also, I would suggest, because of the cost of today, the cost of all your communiques with Napier Public, this has been a tens of $1,000s exercise. You are already committed, aren't you? You're already going to make the decision, and I'm saying it's a bad decision that you're about to make. A bad decision, because what it does is it fixes one seeming inequity with a real inequity. So the 4 points I've got there that I suggest to you to consider: fewer rate categories will only deliver inequity. They will deliver unfairness. We are not all the same. Bayview is not City Residential. It does not have the amenities of the city. Forced sameness is unfair. The best thing to do is to have user pays, qualified by ability to pay as well, and that is a better means of determining the amount of money that people should put into council coffers for the services that you provide. Take me, for example. My projected increase is $680 per annum, 16% rise. Does that seem reasonable to you guys? Doesn't to me, and certainly to none of my neighbours. Does it seem reasonable? So what we would suggest is, and I think we'd be happy with this, and this is my last statement, that a progressive introduction of rate increases commensurate with the delivery of the unprovided services would be acceptable. So I'm suggesting, don't mix one seeming inequity, don't fix one seeming inequity by creating another. And I would say to you, I have written hundreds of cabinet papers. I've appeared before dozens of cabinet committees. I have never ever written a paper which does not have as an option the status quo. There is no ignominy or shame or going back on your word or any such thing. If you say, what we have is okay, there's no problem with that. That is common sense, and I think it is a sensible, rational, logical thing for council to do to preserve the status quo, because by so doing, you're recognising that there are differences from place to place within the great and wonderful city of Napier. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. I'll just open up for any questions from councillors. Councillor McGrath.
Please don't take this the wrong way. When you say status quo, are you suggesting that in 89 they got it exactly right by doing a differential of 0.63, 0.64?
No, I'm not saying that. No, I mean, sure, that's tinkering around the edges. I mean, that in itself was arbitrary, but then again, any other separation between the two would also be arbitrary or deemed to be so by others. There's no ideal in this instance, yeah.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Hi, Edward. Thank you very much for your submission. I was really interested when you were talking through your concept of the vertical equity. And I just wanted to tease out with you, because I wrote down as you were speaking, if not through taxes and the market fluctuations, how best do we find another measure for vertical equity? And then you went on to talk about user pays as the preferred option to build in that vertical equity.
Yes.
And I just wonder, I think user pays as a spectrum, and so I'm interested in your view on where on the spectrum and how we could fit that into our proposed deliberations this afternoon. Obviously, at one end you have community good, everyone pays for community assets, such as what we're proposing in our consultation item, and at the other end, the far end of user pays, you have every time you go to a pool, you pay what it costs per swim at a pool, which is something like $50, which I think everyone agree would be ridiculous to pay that to go for a swim. So how do you build in user pays to a point where you feel you've struck the right balance with vertical equity?
Well, that's the $64 question. There certainly are common services which there should be a common rate for, simply because you're thereby applying horizontal equity. Equal usage should be equal cost. But as we know, some people prefer to do other activities or to consume more services than others, and water is one of them. And it's certainly, we have no problem with the fact that our water is metered. The problem we have is no one else's.
Yeah.
You see, if everyone was metered, to me that's fine. It's the user is paying for it. Why should I pay for your water because you want to have a swimming pool and empty it every week? I don't know whether that answers your question, but it's a difficult one. User pays. We as I said, we do it when we have power. If you put your heater on more than anyone else, well, why shouldn't you pay for it? You do pay for it. But when you get to even the use of the swimming pool you mentioned, if I go every day, I'm getting more than my fair share than you who go once a year. So how can you balance that out? It's a difficult one. All you can say is, as indeed you do with water at the moment, water is a good one because you have a common factor of the $236 per unit, right? And then we pay extra out there. Like I think where I paid a couple of $100 last year, over and above that. My neighbour paid $500, but he says he's contributing to the environment because he's keeping his trees alive.
Thank you. That's given me some context. Thank you.
Yeah,
Councillor Taylor.
He's covered mine.
Right, okay. And I guess to tease out a little bit more, the Deputy Mayor's comments around that community good, and I think I potentially look at it slightly different with some of those community facilities as about being equal access as opposed to equal use. So for example, the library or the pool, obviously people have different interests, but everyone has the ability to have equal access. And what is our role as a council to actually make that affordable and accessible to our wider community? And as you have agreed, it is challenging. It's a balancing act, and we're going to do our best to land on an outcome that is fair and equitable for the whole of our community.
Excellent.
So if there's no further questions, I'd like to thank you very much, Eda. You have brought our submissions to a conclusion, and we're going to take a short break now, and then we will start our deliberations. I think we'll reconvene at 3:30. Thank you.